It's Wednesday, my dudes. I apologize. I promised myself if I ever recorded a podcast on Wednesday, I had to start off like that. But hey, everybody, this is On the Flank, episode 9. We're recording a little bit late. We're recording it on a Wednesday. I'm a little busy here in these next 2 weeks. So we might have a little bit of a different schedule. Wednesdays might be when we're coming out. We'll let you know via Twitter. But yeah, you're listening to On the Flank. I am one of your hosts, John George, alongside Joe Kirkpatrick. Say hello, Joe.
I feel like I should say something different on a new day, but I got nothing.
I stole the only good phrase for Wednesdays. I guess there's like hump day as well, but that's old, That's old stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is when it comes to analysis, we are on the flank. Joe, we luckily, last second we've gotten some more news to talk about this week, and waiting till Wednesday might have been a good idea because we got most of our news on Monday.
Yeah, I think in fact all of the signings, except for maybe Florida, that have happened in the last 3 days after Monday. So
Exactly. So we're lucky. We're lucky that I was busy on Monday, Joe. All right.
there you go.
Yeah. So we've got a nice amount of signings. We're also gonna go over the rosters so far. Just a little nice offseason recap as far as official announcements go. I'm also going to mention some rumors, but just take those with a grain of salt. Of course, rumors change all the time. And we had a new patch, a Halloween patch, so we're going to talk about that eventually. And we've got some nice topics to talk about as well this week: collegiate esports and some players union stuff. You excited for this episode, Joe?
It should be a good one.
All right, let's hop right in with the news. Of course, no events going on right now, so we go straight to the news. We talked about it last week. There was a Chinese announcement that was translated into English of the official details of Owl Season 2. Well, we got the English announcement. A lot of the stuff from the Chinese announcement was confirmed and the same, but we got a few new tidbits of information. Confirmed there will be 3-stage finals, with the 4th stage final being a wild card play-in. These stage finals will all have 8 teams in them, so the top 8 teams from each stage will be put into a bracket with a quarterfinal, semifinal, and final. That is a big expansion from last year. It actually started at 2, it started at 3, then moved to 4, and now we're going to 8 teams per stage final, which makes sense with 20 teams this year. And then we got official details on how many teams will be in the wildcard plan. Of course, we knew about the wildcard plan. I had said that it would probably be 7 through 10, but it will be 7 through 12. The 7 through 12 seeds. So we'll have a 6-team wildcard plan. You can't avoid the old bye with that one, unfortunately, but I think a bye is a little bit of an advantage in something like a wildcard plan because the 7th and 8th seed only have to win one game in order to make it to the Overwatch League playoffs. What do you think about this new information that has been added through this English article, Joe?
Yeah, I just wanted to add your very last statement there about the play-in at the end of stage 4. That especially if this play into the season playoffs is sort of treated like a stage 4 finals, that would make sense. As far as to have the bye giving an advantage to the 7th and 8th place seeded teams, because again, if it's supposed to be kind of like a stage 4 playoff, it'll likely be on the same patch, so there won't be some of those issues. It'll likely pretty soon after stage 4 concludes, so there won't be some of those issues we had with the playoff play-in or the playoff early rounds last season, talking about, was it actually disadvantaged for New York and Valiant to have a bye and all that sort of thing. Hopefully that'll be addressed. It sounds like by the way they've set this up here, which is good. And I think, in general, getting rid of the stage 4 finals, it's fine. Last year, obviously, that was a team like Dallas Fuel would have enjoyed to actually have those finals, or the playoffs that they played in. But at the same time, there were people pointing out that there wasn't much to play for at that point because most of the season rankings and season playoffs had basically been set. So I think that makes sense to go ahead and drop that. Just in terms of fan engagement and interest. Because it might not come out the way it did in season one that there necessarily would be any interesting storylines at all necessarily. So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely have seen some people complaining about the lack of a stage four stage playoffs, um, and stage finals. But I think with having this playoffs planned, there, I don't know, it would just be too much to have a stage playoffs and then a play-in. And also, you still have all the teams at the bottom of the barrel, probably like 16th to 20th place, won't be trying. You still have like 12th place, 13th place, 14th place, 15th place, all fighting for that 12th place spot. Really trying to make it into that wild card play-in, um, and try to make it. And I think this will be super exciting. I think the playoffs play-in will be more exciting than a stage finals, because there's a possibility that we get that Cinderella story, that 12 seed, that 11 seed, making it into the Overwatch League playoffs. That's some exciting stuff. I'm really excited for that. Um, I mapped out. I mapped out what the league schedule is probably going to look like, right when this announcement was made, just based off of their all-star summer vacation and all this stuff. I wanted to see how long the entire league would be this year, because I know it probably is going to be longer. Last year it went from January to August. This year it's supposed to start in February. I believe from February to the beginning of May will be stage one and stage two. Then they'll do a nice little month break. And then from June to August will be stage three and stage four. Um, the end of August is when the play-in is. And then I imagine they'll have a week break. Last year they had like an entire month break between playoffs, and I believe they are not going to do that again, because that was a big hype killer, and they probably would have got more viewers, because I don't think a lot of people knew that it was happening. So I think they'll only do a week break after the play-in. Some people were predicting that they were going to do stage four a week break, then the play-in, but I think they'll do the play-in the week right after stage four. I don't think there's any point in having them take a break.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they'll take a week break after the play-in, and then playoffs will begin. And based off of if things work similarly to, I believe there's still 5 week stages, right? They announced that.
Yeah.
Things work similarly, then the last week of September should be when the Overwatch League season ends. So February to September should be interesting to see how that affects World Cup going forward, because World Cup has always started in late summer, as far as qualifiers go. So with the Overwatch League players' attention on Overwatch League during that time World Cup is, it should be interesting to see how they handle that next year.
Yeah, because they've sort of built it last 2 years now around BlizzCon, which is that first weekend in November. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep, first of all, if they keep this World Cup format, 4 group stages, it makes sense. But if they put them all in subsequent weeks, 4 weekends in October, 1, 2, 3, 4 group stages, and then the first one in November is BlizzCon. I mean, that would be super compressed, which I imagine isn't ideal from a marketing standpoint, that you want to try to build that up over at least longer than a month, to build hype and that sort of thing. But yeah, on the other hand, you definitely also don't want that conflicting with Overwatch League. So yeah, I have to see how they all line that up.
Yeah, they could definitely try to do that. Teams were being built during the Overwatch League season last time, so I don't doubt that they can build the teams, choose team captains during the Overwatch League season like they did this past year. They just won't have time to practice, is my concern. If you have, I mean, if you have the best players, they're probably going to be in that grand finals or towards the end of the playoffs. And all these other teams that don't even have Overwatch League players are going to be practicing consistently. And there are going to be a lot of teams that don't have Overwatch League players because the majority of the league is looking like it's going to be Korean at this point. But yeah, I don't know what they'll do. I guess they will make it those 4 weeks in October, but that I don't know. It can be done, obviously, but it definitely doesn't give the players too much time. It doesn't give the players any of a break, which they have said over and over again that they want to give the players a break. So either we're going to get a compressed timeline, and if we get a compressed timeline, I truly believe a lot more pro players, especially the ones that are going to be towards the end of the season, are going to decline because they want a break because of how much closer the entire event sort of is together. If you played in the qualifiers, at least you got that like 2 month break after the qualifiers before BlizzCon, but now you're going like 5 weeks in a row with this big tournament kind of. So should be interesting. Anything else to say about this English announcement?
Uh, yeah, I don't think so. Other than, it's confirmed what we already knew, in some ways, so that's good. I'm curious to know the schedule tab. Yeah, so there's still nothing on the schedule tab of OverwatchLeague.com about season two yet, but we'll see something at some point, I'm sure.
I once again, I mean, there is no Overwatch League panel at BlizzCon this year, but once again, I'm expecting that schedule to come out at BlizzCon. Unless it comes out in the next couple weeks. I don't know. We'll see. It came out at BlizzCon last year, so I'm just going off last year at this point. We've got some expansion team stuff going on here. Some team branding announcements, and Joe, you know how team branding announcements make me feel. They make me real happy. I love colors, but Toronto, the Overwatch League Toronto team, has announced that they will be having an unveiling party next Wednesday, a week from today, October 24th, from 6 to 11 at Toronto's Berkeley Church in Toronto. That makes me real excited that they're unveiling it. We didn't have any like unveiling parties in the city that these teams are from, so this is a really cool thing that Toronto's doing. I'm assuming that they will be announcing their team branding and logo, all that stuff, colors. Hopefully some coaches, hopefully some players, but to the smallest extent, I expect at least some branding and stuff like that. If it is just a party and they're just like having fun with their fans and they announce nothing, I will be very upset. What do you think they're going to announce, Jeff?
Yeah, so hopefully, if I were a Toronto fan, and I might end up being, who knows. But yeah, if I were a Toronto fan, I would ideally, be looking at this event. Hopefully, we get, branding and colors. And obviously they've had, I don't even know how many weeks now, to sign players. Um, whether or not they have a full roster, who knows by now. But yeah, to be able to include some roster announcements there, maybe even have some players there at this venue. It sounds like that they're planning to have some sort of concrete event there. But yeah, if they were able to have some of their players on the roster, or maybe even their entire roster there, to meet fans and to experience that event, I think that would has the potential to be really cool. And it sounds like they'll be doing a live stream of it too. So I might even actually watch. Again, that's here on the 24th, which is next Wednesday night.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching. Apologies, they do have a coach already. I forgot. They announced Bishop.
Uh,
Yeah,
there you go.
which makes Bishop. They're at a church. Makes sense. Um,
Uh, Puns, kind of.
kind of. Yeah, but I expect that would be super hype if they just like brought the players on stage and they were like, I believe there hasn't been that many rumors about Toronto as other teams, other expansion teams. I think Toronto's been pretty quiet on the rumor front, so it'll be pretty interesting if they just brought out the players. Um, if they had like official merch already or something, the players were wearing it, like that would be super hype. And I don't think anyone knows really what Toronto's branding will be. Right now, their entire Twitter's like black and white. Um, of course, everyone's responding to this tweet with gifs of Drake. Maybe Drake will be there. Um, the good old Toronto. I'm excited for this one, and you know why this makes me excited is because it lets me know that very soon these other teams are also going to be announcing branding. Of course, last week we got the Atlanta team making their Twitter, and of course it was very red themed. Officially, the Vancouver Overwatch League team. It's very weird that we're grasping at this. But the Vancouver Overwatch League team has made their Twitter theme green. Oh my goodness. That's cool. I like green teams. They're, of course, the Vancouver Canucks owners also own this Overwatch League team, and the Vancouver Canucks are blue and green. So if they go with a similar style to that, that'd be cool. I definitely like the Vancouver Canucks blue and green. It's like a nice little. It's exactly the green they honestly have on their Twitter right now. It's a nice little dark foresty green that the Canucks use. I like it a lot.
It kind of reminds me of LA Valiant green a little bit, but yeah.
But no gold alongside it, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, speaking of which, this isn't on the list, but I saw somewhere, I don't know where, but I saw somewhere that apparently, like Florida, supposedly Florida and Philly and LA Valiant, and maybe somewhere else had put in a request to Blizzard to change their colors for season 2.
Oh yeah. That was yes. There was no official like the rumors were that Florida, I believe it was either Valiant or Gladiators. I thought they said like an LA team.
Yeah, they said Gladiators, but it was actually Valiant because
Okay.
people were complaining about the yellow and green. That's what made me think of it too.
I don't mind the yellow and green too much, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. The only change I could think of, I mean, obviously Florida's going, hot pink and light blue, which would be that'll be cool. But for Valiant, the only change I could think of is to go to like a darker, like a pretty dark green and gold rather than like light green and yellow, which is kind of what they're at. To sort of darken it up a little bit, that'd be cool, I think. But
if anything they could do with the yellow, it would be to make it a little like make it goldy or bronzish, even like make it. I don't know. The yellow is a bit bright right now. But yeah, I think we didn't we talk about this on the podcast? The rumored teams to go with branding changes, because I feel like I feel like I have a memory of ranting about it. I don't know if it was on this podcast. Or...
Doesn't sound familiar, but who knows?
Yeah, because I was talking about how it would make no sense. It would make no sense for Overwatch, for like the Overwatch League, to let all these people just rebrand like every year pretty much. They probably want to give them some time, especially when like the rumored number was like 7 teams. It was like 7 of the 12 original teams wanted to rebrand. And
wow.
At that point, if you're the Overwatch League, you just gotta say no. You're like, no, we wanted franchises. We wanted to like keep this consistent for a reason, guys. We got to keep branding consistent. So maybe they'll eventually let rebranding happen. I know traditional sports definitely allows it to happen, but they only about like 1 team rebrands per year, if any. So, and if they rebrand, it's like such a slight change. It's either like the logo changing a little bit, or like their jerseys changing, or something like that. And it seems like all these teams regret their branding extremely and want to change everything. But yeah, Florida Mayhem, I'm very sad that they couldn't get the rebrand. But all the other teams I'm absolutely fine with. I'd have no complaints about any of the other teams' colors, honestly. Just the Mayhem. They have very ugly colors.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Florida Mayhem, they have signed 3 players this past Monday, or was it Sunday? It was Sunday, which is a very weird time to break news. but they have announced the signing of 3 new Korean players. We got Chris. Chris is a support player who was on a contenders Korean team. His team was what's his name?
Meta Athena.
Meta Athena. Of course, Meta Athena. They have been in the Korean scene since Apex. They have never really been top tier, I guess you could say. The highest they got was 4th in Apex Season 2. They've been in trials in Contenders Season 1. They got 11th or 12th. And then they were in trials last season. They weren't even in the regular season contenders, of course, but they got Chris. He's a Korean support player. He's mainly known for his Lucio, and Lucio's appearing in the meta a little bit more. Of course, I believe this guy's an upgrade from whoever Florida had last year. BQB is the next one. He is a DPS player specifically known for his Sombra play. He was on X6 Gaming. Of course, X6 they got first in Contender Season 1 Korea. And he is now a Florida Mayhem man. And the last one is Swan. He's a main take player. And he was with Kungdu Panthera up until Overwatch Contenders when he signed with NRG, who is the San Francisco Shocks, their team in North American Contenders. So 3 pretty good players here. What do you think about these signings?
Well, I think first thing interesting to note is that brings Florida now up to 4 DPS players on their roster currently signed, which is interesting. And one of them is not Logix. One of them is Tvik instead, which whatever. We've talked about that. Yep. But yeah, in general, I mean, they're obviously once they made all their cuts, they had hardly anyone. So they're building now around what they have, which is good. And towards where they need to be. I mean, I don't personally know anything much about these signings. Obviously, we've talked about sort of the direction Florida seems to be heading towards more of a Korean team. Obviously, we have Apply and Tvik still in the team who are not Korean.
Everyone else is.
But everyone else is, exactly. So yeah, it'll definitely be a really new Florida team. Maybe new branding, maybe not, but certainly a new face in the player bench.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I believe, unless we get just like a signing of 1 more player or 2 more players, this probably should be it for them. They have 9 players on their roster now, which is about the average of every team. So they're definitely not going with the 6 players like they did in the first season, which is good. But I think this should be it. It should be interesting to see what direction they go and how these players mesh together. But I'm down for these signings. BQB, of course, former Kungdu or X6, as he's looking pretty good, and former Kungdu Panthera Swan is looking pretty good. I don't know too much about Chris, but you gotta like Florida Mayhem trying to rebuild. You gotta give them props for that. We'll see how they do though. What's our next signing? It's a pretty big one. Dallas. They add Closer from London. This happened Monday night. So we got good old Closer joining Dallas Fuel. Of course, Closer, London Spitfire champions. This is actually the first player that London Spitfire is losing from the end of the season. But he's a backup support, so he's not too big of a loss for the London Spitfire, but a great addition for the Dallas Fuel, who only have Harry Hook and Unco as supports on their roster right now. Do you think Closer is Dallas Fuel's best support now?
I don't know. I mean, certainly, we've talked. I think we've talked a little bit about, while we had London's roster, sort of evolved through season 1. I think they actually started season 1 with 12 players, and then dropped several, midway, and then now they're down to 6 plus guard. But we'll talk about him. But yeah, so. To have that deep of a roster and that deep of a talent pool as well, when they made some of their other cuts, it wasn't even necessarily due to some sort of failing by the player, but just that they had such a deep talent pool that they could afford to lose these bench players who really should be um, contributing a lot to some other team. And yeah, so definitely closer is an example of that for sure. Going now over to Dallas, looking at Unko and closer, obviously Unko was a really good pickup for Dallas midseason last year. Harry Hook, obviously, like you said, some of this variety in the support meta is good. He doesn't have to play, Mercy the whole time. But yeah, it's gonna be good. But obviously, lots of these changes are going to be good for teams, but good for Dallas. Add that variety, add that ability to do different things with their support lineup. They might not have been able to otherwise.
Yeah, I like this signing for Dallas, and hopefully we see some more Dallas signings soon. With their losses this offseason, obviously we'd like to see some more signings. Um, London Spitfire, who lost closer, have now signed two players. The first one is a guard from Element Mystic. Element Mystic, if you don't know, another Contenders Korea team, and they are, according to rumors, they are a very hot team right now to get signings, up there with Kungdu Panthera and Runaway. They made the semifinals last year, or in the last season of Contenders, and guard is a DPS player. Plays Tracer and Sombra. So London Spitfire adding another DPS player to their already stacked Birdring Prophet. Two DPS players right there. Guard's going to be a nice little addition on, especially with Sombra in the meta. And then their second signing, which just came out, was Krillin, and Krillin is a pretty unknown player. He was trialed by the London Spitfire. Of course, most teams had trials to see who they wanted to sign. Krillin was one of those players that they apparently really liked, and is going to be replacing Closer as one of the backup supports. The team he was on was called Crusher in Korea. He is a Korean, of course, and they were in the open division. They did make the Contender Season 1 trials, but they were an open division most of the time. So this is an open division player who they saw in trials and they really liked. Thoughts on these two signings, Joe?
Yeah. So coming into London, like I mentioned, they were down to 6 players now plus guard, and Krillin makes 7 and 8. But what flex support is what Krillin? Yeah. So the open trials is I think this is one of the first results we've seen out of some of those. Like you said, several teams did. So that's really cool to see. To be able to add to that, out of some sort of local type talent. They talked about, we can't wait to watch this diamond in the rough, says the London Spitfire Twitter. So yeah, being able to watch that, cool. Being able to watch that will be pretty good, effective. I think he's probably 18. He's replied. Actually replied to that announcement tweet. He says, "Hello, I'm Spitfire's youngest member, Krillin." So he looks very young if you see his picture. But yeah, being able to add to that, and so not only having all of these obviously superstar first string season championship players on their roster now, but being able to work with some of these newer faces and really develop them into top tier owl talent. It's good for them. It's going to be good for the team as well.
Yeah, of course. I always like these open trial players, or these relatively unknown players on like trial teams or bad contenders teams, that, or just from ladder as well. Honestly, like those are some fun pickups. Of course, the biggest one from last season was Jonak, and he ended up being the season MVP. So maybe Spitfire has another Jonak on their hands, Krillin, because he does play Zenyatta. So who knows? So with those signings, I thought it would be fun to just go over the roster changes so far this season, because a lot has happened. I thought it'd be fun for the not only the listeners but for me as well, because I haven't really gone over it too much. So I'll start off with the Atlantic Division. I would like to mention expansion teams, but almost none of them have officially signed anybody besides Washington. So I'll start with Boston Uprising, who, of course, they in the offseason dropped Mistakes, Kalios, Avast, but they have had no signings yet in this offseason. They still got a 6-man roster. Of course, there was the official announcement that Color Hex was going to Toronto Esports, which is their contenders team. So Color Hex could very well be seen on the Boston Uprising roster this season. I'm sure it's just a matter of time before they announce that. We just talked about the Florida Mayhem, who added Chris, BQB, and Swan. In this offseason, they also added Zephyr from the Seoul Dynasty. They added Hagopin, who, of course, former London Spitfire, who went to Mayhem Academy at the end of the season. Now on the main roster of Florida Mayhem, and Apply, who was also on the Mayhem Academy team. They're one American, Apply. So they added 6 players. They dropped 6. I'm not going to name them all, but yeah, lots of droppings this season and additions for Florida. They pretty much got the same roster besides Tavik, Cyplayer, and Awesome Guy. Houston Outlaws. They came into the offseason saying that they really like their roster and they didn't want to change too much, and they have pretty much done exactly that. Mendo, Clockwork, Fact Fiction, all dropped. All players that didn't see too much playing time. And they have only added Dante, who, of course, in a trade from the San Francisco Shock, they received Dante, which is a great addition for the Houston Outlaws, who needed a tracer player. And they traded their Academy, GGEA, main tank Smurf. They really don't need main tanks at this point with Muma. So I think they should be good on that. So they traded off one of their really good prospect main tanks for Dante, which was a great trade for both teams. London Spitfire, of course, we just talked about that. They added Guard and Krillin. They dropped a bunch of their players right before the grand finals and the playoffs. But the only person they officially dropped in the offseason now was Closer, who is now on the Dallas Fuel. Newark Excelsior, they have only dropped Janice in their, not only this offseason, but in the entirety of NYXL existing. They have only ever dropped Janice, who is now on the Washington D.C. team, of course, and they have added nobody, and that is
that's probably okay.
Yeah. Philly Fusion. They dropped Shadowburn, very sad, Dayfly, and Joe Meister, and their only addition so far this offseason has been Elk, their support from Fusion University. Hopefully some more Fusion University signings coming soon, but they still have a team full of, Philly Fusion, second place team last year. They don't need to do too much either. I guess I'll go over coaches a little bit. Atlanta has Sephi, Silence, and Caceros. Toronto, of course, chose Bishop as their coach. And then Washington, they signed Janice, and they got Wizard Kyung from NYXL to start off. We go over to the Pacific Division. Dallas Fuel, of course, added Closer, but they unfortunately had to drop Coco or add him as a coach. Chips was dropped, and then Siegel retired from Overwatch League to stream. So far, they've only added Closer, so they're keeping pretty much the same roster so far. They've got 8 players on their roster rather. So we'll see if they add anybody else. Los Angeles Gladiators, no. They've got 6 players. Of course, their biggest loss was Fissure, who went to the Seoul Dynasty. They also dropped iRemix, Asher, and Silk Thread, and now they've got 6 players. As far as rumors go, though, Los Angeles Gladiators, it seems like they're making some of the bigger signings. These are just rumors, but the latest rumors are that Decay from Kungdu Panthera, who is considered one of the best contenders DPS talent out there right now, is going to be signing with the Los Angeles Gladiators, as well as Kungdu Panthera's Roar, who is a main tank, which would be a fantastic replacement for Fissure. Those are just rumors right now, of course. But it's looking like LA Gladiators might be able to win the offseason as far as these old teams go. Valiant. We move on to Los Angeles Valiant. They, of course, dropped Verbo, Numlocked, and Finzi. And they have added Kuki as a tank. Of course, another Seoul Dynasty talent, much like Zephyr, who went on over to the Los Angeles Valiant. San Francisco Shock. They had a very young team that that started really peaking at the end of the season. So, of course, they don't want to make too many changes. They did end up dropping IDDQD, Nomi, and Dahak, just cutting off the fat that they don't really need there. They have added Smurf, of course, in that trade with the Houston Outlaws for Dante. And they have also added Rascal, who is former London Spitfire, former Dallas Fuel, who went to
Former NRG.
Former NRG. Of course, Rascal had trouble with Dallas Fuel. I can't remember exactly. Do you remember exactly the reason? Was it that he just had trouble communicating with the team?
Yeah, or like, wasn't there something about like that he was like being obstinate or something too? I don't remember that for sure.
I don't know.
But yeah, like there's some sort of communication thing. Yeah.
It definitely was a communication thing. Hopefully that issue doesn't happen with the San Francisco Shock as well. But we'll see. We move on to Seoul Dynasty. Of course, they've been giving up their players for a lot of people, and signing Fissure is probably one of the reasons they don't have too much money to sign some other players or keep these other players on contracts. But they ended up at the end of the season dropping Wakid, Guido, and Miro. Very sad to see them part with Miro. But then they also parted with Zephyr and Kuki. As I mentioned before, Zephyr going to Mayhem, Kuki going to Valiant, and their big pickup, probably one of the biggest official pickups of the offseason so far, is they got Fissure as their main tank. Shanghai Dragons have done nothing. They dropped almost their entire team, but as far as rumors go, they still have Dia, Gagiri, and Fearless, but as far as rumors go, it's looking like Shanghai is set to win at least one game. While Los Angeles Gladiators are rumored to get 2 Kongdu Panthera players in Decay and Roar, it is rumored that the other 4 starting players from Kongdu Panthera are going to be going to the Shanghai Dragons, which is fantastic. Kongdu Panthera has always been known to have amazing Korean talent. They got second in the last season of Contenders. They're a big, hot commodity this offseason, and everyone thought that a new expansion roster would be getting them, and it's looking like, according to rumors, that Shanghai Dragons will be getting them, which is crazy because they must be offering them a lot of money or something, because if I were those Kongdu Panther players, I would be like, I don't want to be on the team that went 0-40, but maybe some of them want a redemption arc. All right, that was a mouthful. Not too much has happened this offseason.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna mention that. Yeah, it's a lot to say, but really, there's not much actually to say.
Yeah. A lot of the people have been dropped. Not too many people picked up, and some rumors basically. But as far as rumors go, there have been tons of rumors about Runaway, Vancouver signing them, Vancouver only signing 4 of them. But all we know officially is that today, Runaway has officially announced that their 8 rostered players from last season have all got an Overwatch League Season 2 contract. So that's pretty big news for Runaway. I think we all expected it. But officially, they all have been contracted. It's just up to whoever signed them to announce it. Anything to say about a roster recap and this? Because I didn't let you talk about the roster recap.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's good to think through all that again. Obviously, there's still some teams like the LA Gladiators in particular, Shanghai Dragons in particular. I can't think of a third example, but there are definitely still some teams that have some work to do still. But we knew that already going into it. It's just trickling out slowly. I mean, at some point we're gonna hear all of it, and then we'll have, and then we'll just talk about something else, I guess. But in the meantime, they're keeping us in business, with their slow releases here.
Oh yeah. Once it's all gonna come out once, and then we're gonna have a 4-hour podcast probably. Um, like that's all I see when I see that no news has come out. I'm like, oh god, this is all gonna pile up on us in 1 week. Um,
Yeah. Like we said, it's probably gonna be the week of BlizzCon. We'll just have to do like 3 shows.
yeah. But we'll definitely go more in depth. I don't think once these rosters are announced, we'll talk about it briefly, and then I imagine we'll go more in depth on what we think about these rosters when we have some season preview episodes, which I definitely want to do. A little prediction, little preview episodes. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Harblue. He's looking for a team. Contenders, open division, trials, whatever, Overwatch League even. Harblue, if you don't know, he's been in the Overwatch League scene since the beginning. He's a TF2 player. He's good friends with a good old Seagull. And he's an off tank player who he used to be. He was on NRG at one point. He was on Complexity back in the day, and he's finally looking to come back into professional play. I watch his stream often, and he's always talking about how he loves ladder, he loves streaming, but he's a competitive person at heart, and he'll always come back to the competitive scene. Joe, do you know much about Harblue? Do you think you know where he's gonna land?
I didn't know. Yeah, no, as far as yes, I don't know who he is, personally, but yeah, as far as teams looking for an off tank, I mean, scrolling through the list here, nothing comes to mind specifically. I mean, because off tank is like one of those positions that, at least lots of these OG Season 1 teams have covered pretty well. I mean, whether it's Super from Shock, Poco Hotba from Fusion, somebody like, well, I mean, it used to be Seagull, I guess, on Dallas. Maybe Dallas to take one. I don't know. Mickey kind of, but yeah, I don't know.
If it were an Overwatch League team, I would definitely think it would be Dallas, because Dallas is very attracted to those streamers, big names. Um,
It's true. It's true.
but besides that, probably an expansion team. But I don't think he'll. I think he's contenders talent wise. I think he's contenders. I don't think he's going to be in Overwatch League. But he could make his way up there. This was like one of the most upvoted posts on the subreddit. People love Hardblue. He's just a nice guy. So it would be great to see him in Overwatch League, no doubt. And he's been here since the beginning. We're finally gonna go into some Halloween patch notes. Joe, you're our patch notes guy. You want to go over them?
Yeah, so we talked about some of these when they came out on PTR. So some of those haven't changed, but there are a few changes that have come in. So we do want to talk about those. Most recently, there's some bug fixes here uh, from the actual Halloween patch. But the Halloween patch itself came out on the 9th. Seems so long ago, but I guess it's just over a week ago. With New Torb, we talked about that. Halloween event is now out. Colorblind, the rework for colorblind stuff is out now, by which I mean it's live. So if you're colorblind, hopefully that's helpful. From what I understand, that's a really big change that they've made.
Yep.
There's a little note here on the live patch about they've updated the audio mix for environmental sounds and stuff, like for the sounds of third person players walking around, or your allies versus your opponents. That's not something we think about too often, but apparently they've done some tweaks on that to optimize it for, it says, just for more features and more heroes that have been added since they looked at it. So that's fine. That's probably a good thing for all of us. Brig nerf down to 500 health for her shield. That was the same as PTR. They snuck in a Doomfist nerf between the PTR and the live patch. His primary fire now has fall off, starting at 15 meters, which I believe is I believe it's new. The way they're talking about it is that he didn't have fall off at all, but now he does. So a little bit of a Doomfist nerf. We see how good Doomfist is right now. So that's at least something to work on him.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not overpowered at more than 15 meters. So
Yeah, exactly.
the issue is he's overpowered very close up.
McCree's roll buff went through. It's now 6 seconds instead of eight. Farah's slight rework with her rockets went through, as well as the concussion blast buff. Um, on the PTR, it was cooldown reduced to 8 seconds. On live now, it's down to 9. So for whatever RNG they use to decide which changes they keep and which they don't, because who knows if
Yeah.
we never actually hear if it's based on community data or what. But they decided 8 seconds was too much, so they brought it down to 9 seconds. The May changes for her visual effects went through. Orisa spread changes went through. Soldier spread changes went through. New Torb. Let me see. Reinhardt got a bunch of bug fixes, particularly with like the double shatter bug. Supposedly that's fixed now. Um, I remember watching. I don't know if it was a YouTube video or a stream of uh, Seagull testing, or maybe it was Jane testing Reinhardt's barrier field. There's a bug here that says um, they fixed a bug that allowed area effect abilities to hit Reinhardt's barrier field from further than intended, like Junkrat's concussion mines. It was I remember watching that bug being demonstrated. Because yeah, the Junkrat could throw his mine on the ground, like at max range from Reinhardt, and depending on the angle that he held his shield, um, it would do like max damage from some crazy range. So it sounds like that's fixed. But yeah, Ryan obviously was disabled on the last BTR patch, so putting in those changes, I guess, is good for him. And currently we don't have. Oh yeah, Volskaya. They did some map buff fixes, including I don't know if you've seen a Reddit highlight or something of um, failing to trigger overtime on Volskaya second if you fall off of one of the moving platforms for whatever reason. So they fixed that. So that's cool. But yeah, so there's no live PTR patch currently. And in fact, if you open up the game browser, the PTR patch actually has an older version number than the live patch, which is interesting.
Huh.
Because they didn't update it with the Halloween patch to the live servers. But according to Jeff, there'll be a new one, quote, this week, probably with some Roadhog changes. Yeah, because in fact, these were Roadhog changes that supposedly were going to require some animation. So it likely won't be a full rework, but something new is going to go on with Roadhog sometime this week, and that's all we know. But yeah, that's the patch.
Yeah. Interesting patch. When you mentioned I don't know, those bugs like are so specific. Like that Junkrat mine with the shield, like it's crazy that people find those bugs, you know?
Yeah.
And it's crazy that the developers find out how to fix it. But honestly, my favorite part of this is the colorblind options. I've been messing with the colors of the teams a lot, and everyone knows I'm obsessed with colors. But yeah, I ended up going green. My team is green now, and their team has stayed at red. I've tried other colors on the opposing team, but it just messes with me. Have you tried changing the colors at all?
I haven't, no. I don't know if I will, but I guess we'll see.
It's fun. It's a lot of
But
fun.
oh, and the other thing, the decreased setup timers are live now, so it's only 45 seconds for assault, escort, and hybrid maps instead of 1 minute.
Oh yeah, always love those. Always loving that change. Topics. Let's talk about the topics we got this week. We're gonna start with your suggested topic. If you want to introduce yours first, the Custa on collegiate esports.
Yeah, so actually both of these articles we have here to look at came from the same event on October 11 and 12, so last Thursday and Friday. UCI, University of California at Irvine, had an esports conference, the collegiate sort of gathering there on the West Coast to talk about the industry, talk about collegiate esports, where all these things fit in. And so one of the things came out of that. We have an interview here from Action Esports with Custa of LA Valiant. They came and played some show matches with the UCI team, which I didn't watch, but I imagine that would have been cool. Or no, I watched like 2 minutes of it, but I imagine that would have been cool for the team to experience. But yeah, so a brief interview here with Custa from Action Esports, and talking about collegiate esports, talking about what he thinks about the collegiate scene in the context of Overwatch. So and it's actually not very long, but one of the basically what he said was that Custa thinks that as the collegiate scene starts to grow, which continues to grow, which obviously it will, that it's going to become closer and closer to the time when uh, collegiate groups can get into contenders somehow, and to have more influence in the contenders scene. Just like we have sort of this American athletic structure, that you just like college basketball players who often then go to the NBA, that sort of thing. If they're really good, there can be a similar things that happen with collegiate esports going into professional. Um, and I'm not familiar enough with the way other esports do it. Maybe there are similar structures in place for something like Counter-Strike or something. I don't know, but yeah, to be able to connect with collegiate teams and collegiate tournaments, like for example through Blizzard's TESPA organization, which they're very closely intertwined, and that's how they work through their collegiate Blizzard scene, whether that's Overwatch or StarCraft or Heroes of the Storm or Hearthstone or Rocket League now. There's a bunch of different ones, but to be able to make those connections um, into contenders and into, if not a direct feed, but a really accessible feed into the pro scene. Those what they talked about there with Custa. Custa seems pretty optimistic about it, I thought.
Yeah. It's esports is a very interesting scene right now, and it's going to take a lot for college for it to mimic exactly what traditional sports has right now, and for college to be a feeder into the pro scene is it's going to take a bit, because right now contenders, to be honest, contenders is, if you were to compare it to something, I would compare contenders to like high school esports right now, because of the ages these people are, and
Yeah.
because you have to be 18 to play an Overwatch League. I'd say right now contenders is filled with a lot of talent younger than 18, which is high school. And I think that's probably the biggest reason we haven't seen like an NCAA for esports or college esports, is because almost a majority of people playing Overwatch, playing League of Legends, playing these esports games are college age. So a lot of them are skipping college to do this. Um,
They're either pro or they're still in high school.
yeah, exactly. So it's gonna take a while, and I think, as we both know, as founding the Butler Esports Club, and there are tons of people who go to college who are great at esports, but they also want to get their degree, so they're not trying to risk it. Um, but I feel like it will take a little bit, because if you're good enough to be in the pros, then you're just not going to be in college, because you're old enough to do it. And I don't know. Contenders teams are obviously the better option right now, and eventually maybe we can have it. So I don't know. Maybe like 5 years down the line, Custa and all these young players now are like 27, 28, and they're still the best at Overwatch. Then yeah, then college teams are going to be feeding into the pro scene. Um, but so far, it seems like esports is a young man's game, and it seems like there are people in high school who are better than people who are older than them. So It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it is cool that that Custa thinks I think some of the best college teams could definitely compete with contenders players. I know that I follow Clemson esports on Twitter, and I know that one of their players recently got number one ranking on ladder. So I know that these college teams have players good enough to be in Overwatch League as well as contenders. And I'd love to see the Butler Bulldogs and contenders one day, Joe. Take them there.
There you go.
Anything else to say?
Uh yeah, no, I think that's basically it on that.
Yeah, it's a short little thing, and it's definitely in the future. But I definitely, I mean, knowing how much Nate Nancer and all these people love what traditional sports has done, especially the NFL, I know eventually they're gonna want something like the NCAA with a draft because I know that they probably really like that as well. Um, Speaking of a draft, players union. You need a players union for your draft, and there's been a lot of talk about a players union in Overwatch League lately. Specifically, two posts on the subreddit. Um, One brought up, I mean, people post about it all the time on the subreddit. And someone brought it up again today, actually, and it was upvoted at the top. But that wasn't the reason why I wanted to talk about it. There was an interview with Chris Clue, who is a former NFL player, former kicker for the Minnesota Vikings. Um, and there's a nice little interview with him on a player union in esports, and it seems like almost what he is doing is going around. He's very interested in esports because he is a video game nerd, World of Warcraft specifically, and he's been going around speaking to esports players about players unions and the importance of labor strikes and unionizing in esports. Joe, how much do you know about players unions in sports?
Players unions in esports or
In just
oh, just
sports
esports
in
at all?
general.
I mean, I don't know, some maybe. Depends on the context.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason players unions are formed in traditional sports and esports is for players to have knowledge of sort of salaries of other players in the general public, so they know that they're not being ripped off by whatever their team is offering them. Um, Not only with money, but how long their contract is and all of that stuff as well. It also allows for a player draft, which gives everybody in college and high school a fair time to sort of showcase their talents, and then a fair time to get picked by guaranteed a spot in the league, kind of, if you're good enough through a draft. So I guess there's been a lot of discussion from Jeff Clue about how esports players need to make sure the main one is the contract stuff. They need to make sure that they're not getting ripped off, and that they're getting contracts that they deserve. And if they're not, then they need to go on strike, which is a big thing. That has happened in many sports, traditional sports. There have been player strikes that have caused even seasons to start later and even seasons to not happen. Like, literally, sometimes an entire year goes by and a traditional sports season does not happen. And Chris Clue has come out and said that esports players are going to have to do this probably. Do you think, I'm just going to set up a situational for you. Do you think right now all the Overwatch League players, they want a players union, they decide they're going to go on strike, they're not playing a single game until Nate Nancer in the league lets them have a player union? How long do you think until Nate Nancer caves in?
Yeah, I mean, because especially if you said this, last year, obviously, this was at this time last year there was no There was no season yet. Obviously, the league existed, but there was no season yet. And they had all these hopes um, going into season one. And yeah, I think no question they probably would have done whatever the players wanted at that point. And to a lesser extent, I think that's it's closer to true right now, in the sense that that season one, they came out of season one, they made a statement, and they have a reputation to they have a reputation to maintain now, but also they've got all these improvements. They've still got big goals for the league in the future, and they need to make sure that that can all go through successfully. Um, Maybe, yeah. So if it was a question of um do the players unionize, or do we not have a league? Yeah, I think definitely the former would be preferable. Um, Especially and unions came up even at points last year, talking about are we gonna ever get the player rule book, or because as far as I know, we still don't have like a copy of the actual uh, rule book to the public. And are we gonna there were players concerned at the beginning of the season about the lengths of time. They said, "Oh, we need more breaks. We need all this." Yeah, and to be able to affect that kind of change, yeah, they're going to need. Um, People were saying a year ago they're going to need something to be able to do that.
Oh yeah. Um, I mean, the thing is, if they really wanted a union right now, they could easily get it. If you ask me, right now is the time they could easily get it. Um, Nate Nance are in the league. They don't have too much power quite yet, and honestly, if all the players right now decided to sit out, these teams couldn't sign new players and keep the league going or anything like that, because now that we have 20 teams, there's the talent in contenders is actually contenders level talent at this point. Um, so if these teams are going out and signing these players to replace their players and try to keep the season going, viewers are going to drop like flies. There's no doubt about it. Especially season two is so big for any league, and specifically this league. I'm sure they all really want this to thrive. But honestly, I agree with many people who are saying they don't need a players union yet, because the league has been super supportive of them so far, and had, I mean, like you mentioned, with more breaks, when they ask for more breaks, they're giving it to them this season. They're giving it to them, and they're letting them have less games and all this stuff. Like, they're being super cooperative with the players. We aren't at a point where Blizzard and the Overwatch League are like some massive organization like the NFL or NBA, where they are just like screwing over people left and right, and they are money hungry and don't care about the players. We're at a point where Blizzard is trying to work with the teams, the owners, the franchises, as well as the players to make this league as great as they possibly can. So you don't really need a union at this point. Honestly, I think the fans want a union more than the players do. And that's mainly because people like me and you, we want information to talk about on this podcast, right? We would like to know how much money, who makes the most money, who's making the least money. And now we have contracts. Last year we only had contracts that lasted 1 year, but now they can last anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And knowing that information would be huge for people like us, because we could sit here at the end of next season, and let's say someone big like, I don't know, like Profit is only signed to a 1 year contract. We could be sitting here talking about, much like we talk about in the NBA last season, LeBron James was about to be a free agent, and we knew it because his contract is public because of a players union. And everybody was sitting talking about, is LeBron James going to try his hardest at the end of the season? Is he going to be with the Cavs next year? Is he going to sign to a new team? All this stuff. We could be sitting here doing the same exact thing for Overwatch League players, which is it's a big part of the story. It's a big part of, I mean, competition is honestly sometimes a story, and contracts are a big part of it, honestly. And knowing that someone's contract's about to end, it's an exciting part of sports and esports as well. But right now, we have no idea how long these players are signed for and what they're signed for. So it's just gonna be a frenzy at the end of next season, knowing who isn't signed and who is. So I think it's something the fans and people like us want more than the players right now. The players, they pretty much all have the same agent because there's probably only like 2 or 3 or 4 agents in this league, and those agents know how much other players are being signed for. So it's just not too big of a problem for the players quite yet. Any response to that?
Yeah, I mean that all makes sense to me. It's just a matter of seeing what happens.
Yeah, I think this is something down the line, and of course, this fits pretty well with the collegiate esports thing, and drafts, which I think is something esports is eventually going to want to get to, because it's always more entertaining for the fans, and we'll get more viewers when, and and the players will be happy too when it's a draft format. Is always it's tons of fun, because just watching a draft is a lot of fun, but it also just makes things a lot more fair. Honestly, it makes the league have more parity, because usually in drafts the worst team gets the first draft pick and so on. But it's just fun to guess who's gonna go where, and we don't have like all these good players, like the entirety of Runaway going to one team and stuff like that. So I think they eventually want to go into that route. I think that's going to be very far down the line, though. Yeah, I think that's all I got on a players' union. We keep talking about it, but we'll see if it happens. I think it'll happen more once Blizzard's actually being unfair to the players, because it doesn't seem like that's happening so far. So
Yeah.
all right. That's all we got for this week. Unless Joe, you want to add anything last second? Are we done with this episode?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I think we should be good to go.
Okay, then let's talk about our social media. You can follow our personal Twitter accounts. Mine is JWGeorgeIV. Joe's is at Kirkpatrick _ Inc. INC. And our show has a Twitter account that you are going to want to go follow right now, because you will have no clue when our next episode is yet, because we don't have any clue, and we're going to tweet it out. It is On The Flank Show. At On The Flank Show is our Twitter account. Check out our tweets, and we will be tweeting out sometime next week, because I am busy once again next Monday, so it's definitely not going to be on a Monday. We're guessing either Wednesday or Thursday next week. And then you can email us with any topics you want us to talk about on theflankshow@gmail.com. But you could also add us on Twitter if you want us to talk about anything. Of course, you are listening to the podcast, so you found it somehow, but you can find it these other ways. It's at ontheflank.podbean.com on the internet. It's on my personal YouTube channel, which is John George, which is linked on my Twitter account. I know it's hard to just search John George on YouTube and find it. It's on iTunes. It's on the podcast app if you have an iPhone. If you don't have an iPhone and you have an Android, it is on Spotify. Yeah, that's it for this week. Hopefully we've got some good news. Hopefully we're about to have tons of news. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll check you guys next week.